Hey, what's up, BC? It's Steve again, Harmless Rebel. It's time for another hard rock and heavy metal vinyl update. Let's kind of jump into it. First up, this was a pickup I got before Christmas. I don't remember what the name of the web store was, but they do a lot of these limited edition vinyl pressings. And they were having a 10% off sale on YouTube, or they advertising on Facebook, so I jumped on and grabbed a couple albums. And this is one I actually looked for when I first heard it came out, and I couldn't find it anywhere, and it turns out it was only available through this one retailer. Maybe it was Sound of Vinyl or Sound of Music, or Sound of Music. Sound of Vinyl, is that it? But this is Get a Grip, which finally just got a vinyl reissue last year, the year before, maybe it was 2016, and they did this limited pressing on, they call it cow-colored vinyl, but it's on this split black and white, and this pressing sounds really good. I'm really happy to finally have this on vinyl. My formative years being in the late 80s and early 90s, I really listened to it. I loved this album. I listened to it quite a bit. I remember playing the video game that this album played in the background of. Just a great album. Next up, this is one I just got a reissue of. I just got an upgrade copy of. I've always liked this album. They get a lot of flack for being a Led Zeppelin clone, which sounds kind of familiar considering what Greta Van Fleet's going through right now. But this is a debut album from Kingdom Come. Like I said, I've always really dug this album. It was really nice to find a near mint pressing of it. That my other pressing I've had for years and years, it was just beat to shit. Next up, just pulled this one out to give it another spin. This was the first released on second release, I'm sorry, on No Life Till Metal Records. This is the Deliverance debut album. I actually pull this one out pretty regularly and spin it. I love this album. I couldn't pick between their, everybody talks about Weapons for Your Warfare being their favorite. I can't really say between these first two albums. I love them both. And it's definitely a must-have. If you haven't grabbed it, I'm not even sure if these are still available, but definitely a must-have for any of you thrash guys out there. Let's see what that's actually in the background as well. I've talked about Ashbury quite a bit. They were #2 on my best of 2018 list. This is their album from 2010. I'm sorry, 2004. It was originally released. But this was released by the band themselves. This is Something Funny Going On. This is not as good as their 83 debut or their album Curse of the Stygian Witches. Do I have it here? I believe that's what it's called. Eye of the Stygian Witches, sorry. Not as good as those two, but still a really good album. The guitar work, as always, is absolutely phenomenal. It's still that same sound as their first and most recent album. The writing, I just don't think is as good. Man, sorry, my allergies are killing me right now. Next up, I've been grabbing these Alice Cooper reissues as I find them. And they all sound phenomenal. I've actually got original pressings of all of these. But these actually sound quite a bit better. But we've got Killer. And of course it's got the calendar. See if I can get it to pop open. Which is cool. And then it's on this really cool, actually almost similar, real similar vinyl to the Deliverance I just showed. And I love that they matched the vinyl to the album art. It drives me nuts when, they'll have a really cool, maybe green or blue or red album cover. and then they release the album in some completely unrelated color, but whatever. And then again, like I said, next up we've got Love It to Death, which has one of my all-time favorite hard rock songs, I'm 18. And that one's on pretty nice black and white vinyl as well. And actually, when I saw Alice Cooper 2 years ago, they were using this backdrop for their stage show, which was a really cool, a really nice throwback. I'm not sure if they did that, use the same one for their tour last year, but I saw them on the Motley Crue, the final tour. I actually wanted to see him a couple months ago when he came through Atlanta, but the tickets were all the good tickets were sold out, and I tried to get I didn't find out about it until the last minute, and I had to go through secondary retailers, and the prices were just ridiculous. Next up, this is one that Scott turned me on to. He kept hyping the band up, so I eventually grabbed. Got 2 of their albums now. This is their 2017 release. I believe it was 2017, but this is Hell Machine from Screamer. Just really good new wave of traditional metal. And this one is on. See, here's a good example right here. You got and this is actually like a teal. It looks blue on the camera, but it doesn't match this. Had they done like a yellow or a black and yellow custom vinyl, I think it would have looked a lot better. Just kind of my 2 cents there. Next up, man, is that messed up? The next 2 are the same band. I was really looking for their albums when they first came out. I believe this is their first one. Let's see. No, that's the 2017. No, they were both reissued in 2017. But this one was like 2000. I can't even remember now. I want to say one's like 2014, one's 2016. Nope. 2012. 2013. So these are both older albums, but these are the Iron Curtain reissues from last year. I got turned on the Iron Curtain originally through a 7-inch that I bought. Anytime I see any of the high roller 7-inches for a band I haven't heard of, I always grab them. They're usually only like $5 or $6. And I've found some really good bands that way. And I really dug what I heard from Iron Curtain. These guys aren't, I would call these guys kind of mid-level new wave of traditional metal. They're not as good as some of the bands. And now I'm drawing a blank. Like VOJD or Void or even Screamer there. Still really good though. I've heard they're really good live. I know Renee talked about them doing a really good live show. It's just really the vocals are the weakest part of the band. If they got a little bit better vocalist, I think the band would be over the top. But still, it's good albums. Don't take that as a reason not to buy them. And, you know, there's a lot of vocalists that I love that people hate and vice versa. So just because I'm not big into the vocalist, I've still given these a bunch of spins, and I still really dig the albums. But a little bit of Iron Curtain there. And I was looking for those forever. I was really glad when I saw that they got reissued. Next up, this is one I picked up from Eric Dust. I love this band. I've never seen them get any love. Actually, I was going to clean this up before I showed it. But this is Mekong Delta. This is their debut album. I love technical thrash. And I've always dug this band. It was actually their second album that first turned me on to them. But and I see a lot of people talked down on this first album. I think this first album is absolutely phenomenal as well. Just a really, really good album. I'm going to get the heat gun and use a little bit of Goo Gone to get rid of these. It was a radio station's copy. But man, if you haven't checked out Mekong Delta, you're really missing out. I wish they would repress the Mekong Delta stuff, because it's impossible to find. I've only got one. I think I've got a 12-inch from their third album, or maybe it was an EP, and that's the only 2 Mekong Deltas I've ever run across. Next up, this one has just been on my want list forever, and I hope that is not a split at the top. But regardless, I've seen copies of this, but they've always got fingerprints and they're always jacked up. This one is pretty much in mint condition. It was still in the shrink, but this is the chrome plated edition of Rock and Roll Machine from Triumph. I love this album. I've heard if you play it, it sounds okay. I won't ever play this. It was just something that I've always wanted. This is one of my favorite albums from the band. And if you haven't heard the Canadian version of Rock and Roll Machine, I highly recommend getting it. The American version of Rock and Roll Machine is good as well. However, it's not the same album. It's a comp that includes albums from their first 2 albums. Whereas the original Canadian pressing is an album in and of itself. I don't think that's what I'm looking to say, but you guys get what I'm saying. Regardless, killer album from Triumph, and I'm glad to finally have that one in the collection. Next up, a little bit of Fear Not. I love this album. Their EP is about to come out, so I pulled this out and gave it another spin last night. Just really killer. Was this early 90s when this came out? Yeah, 93. And definitely a little bit of that Skid Row feel. Phenomenal album, though. And this one's the purple vinyl. I don't know how well you can see that's purple, but purple vinyl pressing. Great album, though, from Rox Records. And I'm really excited about the new EP. I've actually heard the first song on it and really dig it. Next up, just another one that I'm super stoked that they finally repressed. And this is Grin from Coroner. This is probably my second favorite album. Mental Vortex will always be my favorite album from Coroner. But look at that. Sounds absolutely amazing. Another, again, speaking of technical thrash, one of the best technical thrash bands of all time. Grin is the most progressive album that they did, and a lot of people consider this their best album, and I can completely understand why. I could actually make an argument for all of their albums being the best album that they ever did. They were just that good, and it's so sad that they just didn't get the recognition that they deserved, because a lot of the bands that were coming out during that period weren't half as good as these guys. And it's good to see them reissue this stuff, and it's good to see that it basically sold out. So there is definitely some love at this point, but this was their final release from '93. And then next up, another one. I just saw that I just saw a list of the 50 best thrash albums of all time, and this one is somewhere in the 30s, and for good reason. I've always loved this album. I had it on cassette at one time, and I played the hell out of it. I'm finally glad to have this on vinyl, though. This is Power and Pain from Whiplash. Always love that artwork, too. Look at that. And just killer 80s thrash. I want to say this was 86. I was going to say 88, so. This one is also on purple vinyl with some white in there. And then last but not least, I talked about this album 6 months ago or so. I didn't know that this band existed, and I ran across the CD somewhere, and when I saw that it was an Eric Wagner project, I had to buy it. I'm a huge fan of his. This may be my favorite Eric Wagner album, which is saying a lot because of the Skull and Trouble and all the other stuff that he's done. I absolutely love this album. I've played it. I played the CD pretty much non-stop for a couple months when I first got it. And then when I saw this one pop up, I had to grab it. It is signed by Eric Wagner. I didn't pay any extra money for that. I think I paid 20 bucks for this. I was on Eric Wagner's website the other day because I wanted the first album from this title. And you can still get copies of it. I think they're on sale for like 15 bucks now. So if you're an Eric Wagner, a Trouble, a Skull fan, make sure you go and buy this. But this is Black Finger, When Colors Fade Away. Just a great album, and one that I definitely recommend. And this one is Translucent Blue. And it's all the elements that you would expect from Eric Wagner. And that's it, VC. I hope everybody's good. I'll try to get something up soon. Take care, and I'll see you later.